Well, welcome to everyone that's watching tonight. So can I just remind people that this is a meeting hosted by the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust for the Badger Group. Donations are welcome, which will go to the trust, and you can see where to donate online on the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust site. So I'm now wearing tonight, I switch hats, wearing my Leicestershire and Rutland Badger Group hat tonight. So good evening to everyone. Sorry that we're a bit late due to technical problems. So welcome to our April meeting. I always remind people, I think everyone watching probably knows I'm chair of the Leicestershire and Rutland Badger Group, get the right title. And I always make a plug for new members. We're always very welcome to, or very happy to get new members. So we welcome people. We have our own small membership fee of £10. If you wish to join, you can go onto our Badger Group's website, badgergroup.org.uk. If that's causing problems, because it's a bit finicky at the moment, you can find my phone number in the Wild magazine, the Trust magazine, and you can speak to me. Okay. I don't wish to say anything else today about badgers. We'll wait for the future. Tonight, I would love to, wish to welcome Isabel Raval. I don't know Isabel very well, but this is an aside to the talk tonight, or well, it's linked to it. People may not know unless they know Isabel. She's a very capable scyther. And Isabel taught me and many others within the Trust to attempt to scythe at least. We sort of got there, I think, didn't we, Isabel, or some of us?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was a success as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, so a big thanks to Isabel. Isabel's been working for 3 years with the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. She's been working on the Charnwood Forest Regional Park project, which I believe is a 5-year project. And so I'm going to hand over to Isabel to talk about her work during that time and for the future. Over to you, Isabel.
Great, thank you for that introduction there, David. I will touch on, hang on, let me just get rid of that. I will touch on the scything actually, as it's all part of the project later on in the talk. But firstly, I just wanted to introduce myself because I'm sure some of you might have met me before, but I'm sure some of you haven't. So like David said, I started almost 3 years ago now working for LRWT, and I was a volunteer before that. Here, oh no, hang on, let me just see why are we not scrolling? Is this still on the, is it, oh, there we go. Okay, let me just check. Okay, right, seems to be working now. So here's a picture from the first year, actually, when I started volunteering with LRWT. And this was when I first got involved actually with the Charnwood Forest project. And then I started working as a member of staff the following year in 2022. So this was starting out in 2021 with our grasslands projects, and I was helping out with the botanical surveys there. You might have seen this picture used a few times before in some of our publications. So at this point, I'd already been involved with the University of Leicester doing some botanical work there, and working at the seed bank project that they had happening at the time, which meant I was once I finished, I was on the hunt for new conservation related interests and work. So that was a good introduction for me to start working for the Charnwood Forest Landscape Partnership Scheme, which I was really happy to help out with when that role came up in 2022. And so like David originally said, it was meant to be a 5-year project, but it's actually ended up being shortened rather due to COVID restrictions at the beginning. So I'll talk through the sort of process that led to the landscape partnership scheme first to introduce it properly. But yes, we are actually, for those that don't know, we are actually due to be finishing our delivery of the project at the end of this month. So this talk came at quite a good time. So what is the Charnwood Forest Landscape Partnership Scheme? I wanted to give a quick sort of introduction to the Charnwood Forest before I sort of delve into properly talking about what the scheme is all about. And hopefully I'll sort of clear up any confusion about what the difference between the regional park versus the landscape partnership scheme versus the geopark, which is now what we're calling it as well. So it's just a couple of nice quotes that I'm going to start off with. I'm sure a lot of people are already very familiar with Charnwood Forest, but perhaps not everything about its history. So yes, a couple of quotes that I really love from this chap who wrote a book called Charnwood Forest and its Environs in 1925. He firstly said, Charnwood Forest has proved of little attraction to the general tourist, though all Leicester pays flying visits on public holidays to Swithland Woods, Bradgate Park and Woodhouse. And I love that quote because nothing's really changed in those 100 years since, exactly 100 years since this was published. And then he also goes on to praise Charnwood Forest in a lovely summary, saying several writers in the past, skipping through the pastoral heart of England, have dismissed Leicestershire as flat and uninteresting. What route they took, I know not, but it is evident that they never visited Charnwood Forest. Nowhere else in the country is there to be found such another remarkable tract of miniature mountain scenery, uprising in rugged beauty from its direct antithesis in landscape. So you may have heard of Charnwood Forest as being referred to as Britain's unexpected upland. It's been used quite a lot as a bit of a tagline during the landscape partnership scheme. And I think it really, aside from what the author, those quotations I just read out, said, I think we all see Charnwood Forest as having a very strong sense of place, perhaps maybe particularly out of the rest of Leicestershire. I'm probably just biased in that, but you know, we know it's very distinctive place. And as we see in the pictures, it's taken at the top of Charnwood Lodge on Timberwood Hill. Things like dry stone walls, a lot of grassland, woodland, fairly sort of uneven landscape, quite characteristic, a bit windswept perhaps, quite characteristic of places in Charnwood Forest. And of course all the rocky outcrops. It's got our county's highest peaks, and of course there's the geological interest, the fossils, 600 million year old volcanic rocks that we hear about quite a lot in the rocky outcrops, and of course with all that geological interest and a large number of rock series found in a fairly small area, there's a lot of history of quarrying, of course, and active quarries still there, and a lot of evidence of old quarries as well that we're told started from the Roman era. So a lot of us know about the fossils that have been found in Charnwood Forest. Most famously, probably the one found by school children in the 1950s. But I, of course, take an interest not only in the geology. I mean, I don't claim to be. I'm no expert on the geology, but because of the geology, it gives rise. The area gives rise to fantastic biodiversity interest as well. So because of how rocky it is, we've got shallow soils with low fertility and rather acid soils, from at least those that haven't been agriculturally improved. And historically, it's not really been cultivated comparatively that much to the rest of the county. So you'll see it described a lot of the time as wasteland in older texts, which doesn't actually, it sounds like a bit of an insult, but it's more just a term to refer to a sort of area of rough grazing or lack of management. And so this sort of lack of comparatively agricultural management means that a lot of it has been left for wildlife. And whilst that has changed somewhat in the past century or so, I think still in comparison to the rest of the county, it is high up in the biodiversity value. So a bit of a timeline for you, just of the past 100 years or so, to just give a bit of a background of the interest in conservation around the Charnwood Forest area, because what we have been working towards and what is currently being worked towards, as you'll see at the end of this timeline, is a protection for the Charnwood Forest as a sort of unit, rather than, we have a lot of SSSIs in the area already, but what we don't have is that recognition or designation as a unit, as a park. So in 1932, the Leicestershire Regional Planning Report proposed Charnwood Forest as a national park. So for a long time, people have known that it was an area worth protecting. But then when the national parks were initially being sort of shortlisted, and the models, the Dow report sort of looked at how a national park model might work, and unfortunately, even in that, Charnwood Forest went into the category of other amenity areas. So even at that point, it didn't unfortunately make the list for a potential national park. But that other amenity areas was described as meriting some form of national level protection in the future. So a bit vague, but it was recognised at the time anyway. But then by 1947, and the Hobhouse report came out, which was a bit more detailed report into the selection, planning and management of national parks. And the committee had again decided that though Charnwood Forest was an area of potentially worthy of national level protection, it was not going to be a national park, unfortunately. And then a decade later, by the time the designation programme was completed for all the national parks around the country, and the Hobhouse list had been also used for designation of areas of outstanding natural beauty, and Charnwood Forest missed out on that one as well. So then by 1960, the National Parks Commission unfortunately decided that due to the planning of, and I mean, I think the building had already started by that point, of the M1 through Charnwood Forest, that meant that it was fully removed from consideration. And I just wanted to go off on a bit of a quick tangent about the M1, because given that I spend so much time in Charnwood Forest, it's something I think about and see and hear a lot. You can't really escape it. This is just a little drawing for those of you who maybe don't know this, about the original plans for the M1. The Leicester Evening Mail was very involved in reporting on the plans during the 50s. So we have a couple of different routes. That's the dotted lines that you can see in this slightly blurry picture. And we have the Saw Valley route on the right-hand side and the Forest route on the left-hand side. And as you can imagine, there was quite a lot of opposition to both for a couple of different reasons. So just some more quotations for you from the time. This one I quite liked. Says, the attitude of those who opposed the route is summed up in the sentiment expressed in a county council booklet only 5 years ago, in which it was said, Charnwood is a valuable part of the national heritage, of which the residents of Leicestershire are the fortunate guardians. And I think we probably still feel the same way about it, about Charnwood now. And then it goes on to say, after that statement, could anything be more Gilbertian than the recent County Council decision taken against the advice of its own planning committee to cut the forest in two with a motorway? For years, residents in the forest area have been subject to strict regulations in order to preserve the area from harm. How paradoxically it is that now the very authorities who impose those regulations are apparently prepared to see the area mutilated. And this quotation from the Leicester Evening Mail just resonates with me, and I'm sure possibly some of you as well, because it reminds me of perhaps how infrastructure planning is still being conducted at the moment. Right, so just to the picture, the little drawn map there doesn't, of course, really show you very much detail, but I'm just going to try to describe it a little better for you, because even though the M1 as it is now cuts directly through Martinshaw Wood, arguably some of the original plans would have been worse route chosen. So on the right hand side with the Store Valley route, it was thought that it went through potentially richer farmland but skirted Charnwood, and followed a line already cut through by the A6 and the Great Central Railway. So largely the opposition to that one was more in the farming community. But then for the forest route, the route was summarised by saying it cuts into the forest just north of Groovy Pool, as you can see there. It will be in sight of Bradgate Park and Newtown Linford, and will pass alongside the Scout Camp at Johnsley Wood and alongside the 12th century Elvescroft Priory and through the beautiful Elvescroft Valley. It will then skirt the front garden of Charlie Hall, pass about 100 yards from Oaks Church and through to the Blackbrook Reservoir. And these are all sort of landmarks that I am near or pass by on a very frequent basis whenever I'm working in Charnwood Forest, and so I do feel quite grateful that we escaped that original proposed route, because it would have presumably decimated quite a lot of those features. So you may be interested, and I was quite pleased to find out that as a result of all this all the sort of protests and opposition, sorry, I'll get back to that one. In March of 1958, after just a few months of having a petition out, there were over 30,000 signatures on a petition presented by the Ramblers Association and a local farmer in Newtown Linford, and I think it's good to know that much support was out there at the time, and was the reason that the route was rethought. And it just sort of demonstrates how at that time people had such a strong sense of needing to protect the area at the time, and how that has not really changed, I think, and we're still striving now to get that kind of protection. So just to carry on with our timeline there, we've seen the M1 built, so then onto the 70s, 1975, the Nature Conservancy Council reported habitat and species lost in their wildlife conservation and Charnwood Forest report, unsurprisingly, and then in the late 90s and early 2000s there were more investigations into whether A or B status could be given to Charnwood Forest, but unfortunately the government were rather reluctant to designate any further A and Bs. So this had all sort of been rumbling on for a while. In 2009, we were involved in producing a report called Charnwood Forest Living Landscape, which some of you may remember when that was published. And again, that found that even since that 1975 report, a significant amount of decline had taken place in the natural history in the area for a variety of reasons. And then in 2012, the Regional Park Board was formed. And that 2009 report, I believe, was actually taken, was carried out because there had been suggestion already by that point of a regional park forming. But unfortunately, a regional park doesn't actually give any kind of national, it's not a national designation, it's just a local recognition and a strategic body and a partnership of organisations, but it doesn't grant any kind of national protection, unfortunately. Okay, so then in 2013, there was a first initial bid to submitted to the National Lottery Heritage Fund for a landscape partnership scheme in Charnwood Forest, but that was unsuccessful. So then the people involved with that sort of went back to the drawing board and then submitted another one in 2017, and that one was successful. So that's what we have been involved in since. So that 2017 to 2019 couple of years saw the development phase of the landscape partnership scheme, and that saw reports such as the Charnwood Forest Landscape Character Assessment and Biodiversity Audit carried out, which especially the Biodiversity Audit LRWT had a lot to do with at the time. And that really informed the work of, that was the development phase of the landscape partnership scheme, informed what the scheme was going to look like later on down the line, what projects would be included and what habitats needed to be prioritised in the scheme. So then by March 2020 was when confirmation of funding success was received from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. But of course that was exactly when everything sort of shut down, so that resulted in quite a few delays in getting started with a lot of the projects, which meant that we did not start our projects until actually the following year in 2021. So just want to move on to a map for you to show you what we refer to when we're talking about Charnwood Forest, whether you want to call it the regional park or, as I said, we're now calling the geopark. And it actually stretches further than you might think, so 158 kilometres squared, which is a bit further if you look back on the map that I have here. As you can see, that dark area that's got Bradgate Bark at the bottom, and then that dark area shaded up to the north, is where a lot of people might think that the Charnwood Forest, the core Charnwood Forest area is, but actually it really does stretch a lot further than that. If you think about the habitats that you experience and a lot of the geology, I believe that this extended map was based a lot on the sort of geological aspects of the area, as well as having some of the main roads border parts of it as well. But if you think about, say, over in Rothley with the at Horsted Road Nature Reserve, or back up in Thringstone with the Grey Stew, or in Cademon Woods, and down the bottom with around Groby with Martinshaw Woods, they all have rocky outcrops within them, as well as, of course, all the classic locations that we think of within the centre of the geopark, such as Bradgate Park or Beacon Hill or Charnwood Lodge, that have a lot of those outcrops as well. So there is actually a much bigger spread of that geological and therefore habitat uniformity. So within the Charnwood Forest Landscape Partnership Scheme, we have about 17 or 18, I think, lead partners. You can see we're on there, and it's a mix of local authorities, conservation bodies, and community engagement bodies. And the idea of the Landscape Partnership Scheme really was to get the funding to carry out projects that would help to connect more people with the landscape of the area and its heritage as well. It's very focused on the sort of where people in landscape meet and come together. So there were a lot of different outcomes, as you can see here, of the Landscape Partnership Scheme. The projects were all split into 18 projects within the Landscape Partnership Scheme, and they came under different headings of Explore, Understand and Care for Charnwood. Our projects came under the Care heading. And here we have a map of this also is a good illustration of both where the boundary of the Charnwood Forest Geopark and the National Forest boundaries overlap. I thought that was quite a good illustration there. And also where all the protected designated sites around the geopark are located. So you can see quite a large density there. So at the moment we have 23 SSSIs across Charnwood Forest, and despite covering less than 10% of the county, Charnwood Forest contains about 50% by area of the SSSIs in the county. So unsurprisingly, with that overlap with the National Forest, they were one of the partner organisations within the Landscape Partnership Scheme. So as I said, our projects came under the Coherent Wildlife Network, which is number 10 project under the Care heading within the scheme, and we had just a few different aims there to improve habitat connectivity and increase coverage as well, coverage and condition. And then it was also, as I mentioned, with the focus on getting people involved and appreciating how special the Charnwood Forest area is. It was also to grow a body of trained and experienced wildlife recorders that can help with ongoing monitoring of key habitats. So our first project, we had two projects within the Coherent Wildlife Network subheading, and those were a grasslands project and a wildlife recording project. So to delve firstly into our grasslands project, we identified within the biodiversity audit that I mentioned before that habitats like heathland, woodland, and wetlands were all, or reservoirs I should say, were all important within the Charnwood Forest, but the grasslands habitat was the one that really stood out as needing protection. So everything we did was based on the Save Our Magnificent Meadows project, which is an entirely external national project. But there's just a few facts on the screen there for you about meadow habitat and how much of it we've lost. Of course, we've all heard that statistic about 98% or 97% of meadows being lost since 1935, and the assumption is that number may may well have increased by this point. Meadows and species-rich grassland are a priority habitat locally and nationally, because of just how much of it we've lost and are continuing to lose. It's a very sensitive habitat, of course, and the majority that remain are very fragmented. Of course, something like having the M1 built through the Charnwood Forest, you know, is a very good example of that kind of fragmentation. And I thought that that number the Magnificent Meadows website gave of 6 million acres of grassland being ploughed up during the Second World War, while of course, you know, I was aware that that a lot of that did happen, I think it really just hits home just how much species-rich grassland was lost, and yeah, just due to those pressures from the agricultural industry, really, and of course there's other things like overgrazing and even undergrazing as well, under management areas that are now inaccessible for machinery, that mean that there are bits of grassland that are just now neglected. And well, I suppose there are other aspects as well that have threatened and caused degradation and loss of species-rich grassland. Okay, so to bring it back, not just nationally, but to bring it back to the Charnwood Forest, why we wanted to look at and specifically focus on grasslands within our project. For conservation, of course, grasslands host a very unique community, and not only the botanical aspect, but the fungi, invertebrates, reptiles, all sorts of taxon groups that are dependent on good quality grassland. And of course, as I said earlier, because of the lack of cultivation in a lot of Charnwood forests, it means that it actually has more remnant grassland and good quality grassland than other areas of our counties, and so it was identified that this would be a good priority habitat to focus on. So we were looking at habitat connectivity across Charnwood, promoting good conservation management, and connecting with landowners to look at how they might be able to better manage their species-rich, neutral or acid grassland habitats that they might have on their landholding. And we were also looking to get lots of people involved, lots of volunteers involved, and get them trained up to help with the grassland assessment. And then, of course, as David mentioned, we've got the scything element, which was good fun. And we had an external trainer come in and hold some training with us for a few years in a row. And then I have sort of pushed to keep that going, which is how I went over to Rutland, went over to the east of the county last year and helped Sarah and Juliet with training up them and some of their volunteers for keeping some scything going within LRWT. So for our grasslands project, we started in May, I think it was, of 2021, and we only had, this was only a 3-year project really in the end, or 3.5 years. We started with 38 compartments that we were looking at. So by compartments, we are talking about either entire fields or just sections of fields. And places where there was need for, they weren't really receiving the sort of optimum conservation management, and so we went in and implemented changes for their management, and that came to over 50 hectares. We acquired another one by 2023. So yeah, overall it was 39 compartments that we had been involved with. So this was over 4 nature reserves of our own. So it wasn't just private landowners that we were involved with, and 10 different private land holdings. And this was on neutral, acid and wet grassland. So they were all very different, to be honest. We had quite a range of grasslands involved. Some of it was pasture, some of it was hay meadow, some of it was just hadn't been managed for quite a while, maybe some of it was sort of newly managed. Yeah, so we had a range of starting points. Some were already designated or locally designated sites, and so when we started in 2021, we took some baseline data, botanical data, using the as I said earlier, the Magnificent Meadows methodology, which of rapid grassland assessment, and in turn that methodology is based on common standards monitoring. So it's fairly straightforward kind of technique, where I'll just go back, where we go in with quadrats and take a sort of random sample across the site, and look at the botanical diversity there. So this was another map of where we carried out that change in management of the sites that were involved. You can see most of them are sort of situated around the Markfield, sort of Whittock, Newtown Linford area, and then there's that little one down at the bottom near Botchton. And they don't look very joined up, but a lot of them were sort of either next to nature reserves or parts of land holdings that are already very good for sort of conservation management, and we just wanted to implement something to make it that much better, or perhaps with landowners that we were already involved with, and we sort of took this opportunity to really be able to give them the time to monitor their meadow. So we had a variety of places involved there. So as you can see there, there's an example of a slightly wonky quadrat square that's being monitored by a couple of staff and volunteer at the time. That's in Colville Meadows, I think, are one of our nature reserves. So the methodology ticks off positive and negative indicator species. So positive species that are sort of good indicators of condition of grassland, and ones that we want to see, with the changed management, we want to see an increase in the number of positive indicators, and then the negatives that aren't that bad in a sort of low density, but we don't want to see them sort of go beyond certain thresholds, because that starts to show a decrease in condition of the grassland. And then there were some other parameters as well that we measured, that again were sort of indicators of how the grassland is being managed. So we've got sward height, herb cover, leaf litter, bare ground, and scrub cover. So again, all of them are okay in certain amounts, but then once they sort of increase over a threshold, then then that sort of puts them into the negative. That is just a photo that I put in there of a cross section of a grassland sward. That one's actually of one of the meadows that's a fairly recent meadow. It's only about 25 years old, I believe. So you can see you've got in there grasses like cocksfoot, which are generally indicators of a bit of nutrient enrichment, and but then there are also some of the meadow grasses in there as well. So this one was really sort of interesting. It's an arable, ex-arable field that was just left to just sort of recolonise naturally. I don't think the landowners did anything at all after it stopped being an all-eucalyptus grape field. So that's, yeah, a very, very interesting one that in the end we didn't actually do any change in the management there, because we thought that after having 25 years of consistently, they're just, you know, treating it as a hay meadow, actually interrupting that consistency would probably not be such a good thing. But yeah, really interesting, that one, to see where the meadow species was sort of gradually colonizing, and you can see things like meadow buttercup and common sorrel in there as well, and plantain, and things that are more tolerant of the slightly higher sort of nutrient content end of things. And there was sort of good patches of things like sweet vernal grass as well, which are meadow grasses that were on our indicator list. So that one was yeah, very, very interesting case. So some more examples of the kinds of grassland we were looking at. As you can see, there were so an example of one of those species, meadowsweet, there, where we would actually take the percentage of coverage of the meadowsweet rather than just taking whether it was present or not, because that's one of the species that we don't want to see it fully take over. And like you can see on the right hand side there, it was just a sort of fully meadowsweet and tall sedge, which is good habitat in its own right, but the sort of worry is that without the right management, that would just spread and take over, where it's in a sort of bit of a mosaic with some more sensitive, more species rich areas of grassland, that would just fully take over, and you'd lose those more diverse patches. Whereas on the left hand side, you can see where it's quite a bit more diverse, and you've got other things there like greater birdsfoot trefoil and marsh bedstraw, and a couple of others that I can't make out there. So it wasn't all fun and games when we were doing our surveys. This was one of the areas. Fortunately, there weren't very many. In fact, I think this was probably the worst one that we had to survey. That unfortunately was rather nutrient enriched from the brook that it runs alongside. So this one was not one. This was, yeah, it was sort of margin of what would have been species rich wet grassland. That at the moment basically just sort of provides a bit of a zone in between the brook and the rest of the hay meadow, which is in fairly good condition. But yes, that bit was unfortunately not doing so well anymore. These are just some nice pictures of some other great indicator species that we came across. We've got harebell there. We've got a bit of vetch in the middle, heath rush, yellow rattle down at the bottom. You see some orchids in that photo as well. We don't use orchids as an indicator species just because they're so sort of unpredictable and unreliable. They are really nice to see, and we did see a lot of them on our surveys, but you know, they don't pop up every year, and so whilst we note them down, but we don't use them as an indicator. And then we've got the Great Burnet on the bottom there, and all of these are sort of indicators of different grassland types as well, with a sort of more acid dry grassland at the top there, and more neutral and, with the yellow rattle, and then slightly sort of wetter grassland with the grey bonnet. And then of course the fantastic sort of immersion of being out surveying grassland and all the incidental records that you make, with an array of invertebrates there. I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to go through all of those, but I'll just make a note to say that the forester moth, which is just on the top right hand side, which is a really beautiful species, that's also one of our sort of rarer iconic species, I think, that was identified for the biodiversity audit, and it was really great seeing that in one of the sites that we surveyed, because it serves as a sort of invertebrate indicator of good quality grassland as well. So of course the grassland conservation management all sort of comes down to making sure you're either grazing or mowing at the correct times, and removing the arisings, not letting a thatch build up on the grasslands, and whichever method you choose. We've got the hay cuts at the top there, we've got cut and collect at the bottom, which sort of acts a bit as a lawnmower, so you don't use the arisings that are cut off, but they end up just sort of being left in the margins. And then some of our longhorn cattle in the bottom corner there. So we had a variety of management changes. This wasn't conducted as a sort of rigorous scientific experiment or anything. So as you can see there, we had only 20 compartments were consistently mown or grazed over both of the years. And there were 3 more that had just spring and summer management in 2022. And we had some green hay spreading, which was really good, which is about sort of spreading the seed from a species-rich donor site over to a less species-rich site to try and improve the condition of that receptor site. And then of course we had the compartments that we sized, 7 of those, and then there were some compartments that only received management for 1 of the years, or even there were 5 that didn't receive any management change. We did unfortunately have quite a few constraints of limitations, a lot of staff changes and things during the project. So yeah, there were things like some of those sites that unfortunately got a bit left by the wayside. So all this is a bit of a demonstration of the green hay spreading that we carried out. So it's a process that has to be done very quickly, all in one day. You can see it on the top left there. You've got to cut the hay and bale it up immediately, but then I know not everyone chooses to bale, but you want to make sure that you're getting it out again before the seed sort of overheats and becomes unviable. So as you see on the right hand side, that's shaking it out again on the receptor site, and then we had a bit of help from volunteers to spread it out a bit more thinly. And then you can see on the bottom, I've just included some one of the really nice meadow species, which is devil's bit scabious, and we did a bit of hand harvesting of seed in 2023 to add to a couple of those sites that we spread the green hay on, and that was really interesting because we were quite worried about the hay cuts in that year, because it was the one that was very wet, that sort of started raining in, I think it was June or July. Yeah, I think it was mid-July it started raining, and you'll probably remember it didn't really stop raining until probably, I don't know, last year, halfway through last year or something. So the thing with that is that we ended up having very late hay cuts that year, which isn't consistently a good thing for grassland, the condition of grassland. But it did mean that the devil's bit scabious actually had a chance to flower, because it's a very it's one of the much later flowers. It had a chance to set seed, which was really good, because normally hay cuts are done earlier than the scabious can get much of a chance to set seed. So that was at least finding a bit of a silver lining in that wet and late hay cut season, to be able to collect some of the scabious, and not only was it able to set seed in the places that it grew already, but we could transport it and try and add it to the sites that we were looking to improve the condition of. So this was just a visit to one of those sites we did some green hay spreading on. The yellow rattle being an annual popped up immediately the following year, but then we also had these other species that will take a bit longer, so we won't be wanting to go back and do a proper survey to assess the differences until a bit later on, maybe a couple of years down the line, 2 or 3 years down the line. You can see some of these seedlings are starting to come up, which is very exciting, but seedlings are rather harder to identify. So I think we've got things like Tormentil, Great Burnet on the right there. Some of the scabious are starting to show some betony, and I think a bit of new additional meadow buttercup, which actually was already on that side, starting to come up there as well. And then, of course, yes, the siding, we had lots of volunteers involved with this. I think in total we had about 40 volunteers or something about that we ended up training, maybe 40 volunteers with staff as well. And yes, so we had 3 years in a row of getting an external trainer in, and we had good fun scything, getting a team together, a volunteer team, and scything together. I could talk a lot about scything, but I'm not going to. That's a dangerous rabbit hole to go down, so I'll move on swiftly from that. But I would certainly recommend getting involved in it if you've been wondering about whether to. Oh, that's just me. That's a picture of me just to demonstrate that I don't take photos all the time, and I do get stuck into getting involved with the mowing as well. This is another sort of incidental sort of records from our activities. The good thing about scything is that it's fairly slow, and obviously lets wildlife escape quite a bit quicker than they will be able to otherwise from machinery. And so you come across a lot of these, a lot of mammals, reptiles, amphibians, all sorts. That was the first time I think that I'd seen an elephant hawk moth larva caterpillar up on the left-hand side there. So that was a really good moment for me to, just mown an area and then revealed that caterpillar. So results of the grasslands project, when we came back and monitored in 2023 and took more survey data, was quite mixed, because of course if you've ever done a scientific experiment, you can't really draw much conclusion from just 2 data points, and also in terms of grassland restoration, just having the sort of 2 years difference between 2021 and 2023 meant that it just wasn't really long enough to see significant changes. This is I'm not going to explain in detail the graph, but it was just showing that largely we did have slight increases in our average numbers of positive indicator species. But the interesting thing is that it's quite sort of varied. This is just showing the differences between the how the sort of change of positive and negative indicator species. So as you can see that in those blue lines, mostly are going upwards in the positive. But of course, if you were to monitor the changes in the grassland, you'd really want more of a 10-year project in order to gather meaningful results, and you'd probably do that monitoring surveying every sort of 2 or 3 years for several times in order to gather that data and maybe get a better illustrated picture of how things were going, because a lot of that could have just been a lot of the change we saw could have just been sort of annual variation. So yes, there was 27 compartments that increased in the average number of positive indicators. There were some that saw no changes and some decreased. Interestingly, 18 compartments increased in the average number of negative indicators as well, which could have, that data could have probably been caused by a variety of things. So quite mixed, but not really at a point where we can draw very meaningful conclusions from that data. This was, oh yes, one of the meadows that we spread with green hay. That was half of it was spread, and that was really interesting. Actually, that was probably one of the best demonstrations we had of sort of efficacy of our efforts to try to improve the grassland condition. So you can't really see much from the photos, but then if you look at the graphs here, on the left-hand side, we've got the sides where the green hay was spread, and then on the right-hand side, we've got the side where it wasn't. And I wouldn't be surprised if just sort of by the management, because you can see even where it wasn't spread, there was a bit of an increase, but it was just such a marked increase. I think that was the greatest increase that we had of positive indicator species, that, it must have been from the green hay. Couldn't really sort of conclude much else from that, because it was such a marked difference and positive increase. But I wouldn't be surprised if the non-green hay half had also sort of received some of the seed either from neighbouring fields that were in better condition, or even from just sort of the seed getting transferred about on the site when hay cuts or aftermath grazing were taking place. Oh yes, and this is just another example of more visual kind of, this is the same quadrat location, and sort of a bit of a visual of where there was an improvement in the species seen. So that all that marsh bed straw that's coming up there that wasn't recorded as present at all in 2 years earlier. Oh, that should say 28th of June 2023. Sorry, on the right hand side. So, okay, and just as we are finishing up, this is the project that ever since the Grassland project finished in early 2024, we'd been running this the wildlife recording project alongside the entire time, but we really got to focus on it since the Grasslands project ended about a year ago. So we had been doing monthly training sessions. Some of you might have been involved with them, I'm not sure. And the idea there was just to really get a lot more people engaged and involved and recording local Charnwood Forest wildlife, because there's concern about, even though Charnwood Forest is historically been a well-recorded area, there's just concern about people, about the numbers declining, perhaps a bit of a worry about not as many young people getting involved with recording wildlife in the area and submitting those records. So we had a partnership with NatureSpot, where we had our own project tag and project area made for us to get people submitting records, and we were able to form a new volunteer group as well last year. From last summer, I started leading a wildlife recording group where we were doing field meetings. So as well as having those training sessions, those monthly training sessions we've been doing for the previous few years, we also added this volunteer aspect where we've just been going out to loads of different locations around Charnwood Forest, and we will have, so we've only got, like I said, the project's coming to an end this month, so we've got 4 more meetings, I think, and we've been to a different site in Charnwood every single time, which I think has been so fantastic for people to realise about how much of the area, probably comparative to the rest of the county, is actually accessible, whether that's from country parks or open access land or lots of footpaths. And you know, it's been really great to have people come out, even people who are local, and say, oh, you know, I've not been to this area before, despite living here for a long time, and that's been really nice to just get people out and appreciating and recognising the great areas that, and introducing them to the great areas that are in Charnwood Forest. In the context of wildlife recording, and sort of trying to emphasise how important that is to keep it up, because of course something like those reports, between the difference between 1975 and the 2009 reports, is just really sort of is highlighted by people, you know, just regular folks submitting wildlife records, because it's just so important to keep on top of, because you know, professionals and members of staff, ecologists, can't be on top of recording everything out there all the time, so it's just so important to get enthusiasts, natural history enthusiasts, submitting those records as well, because we just, you know, we couldn't do a lot of what we do without the help of volunteers. So I think we had, oh yes, I should just mention that we had, we were able to continue with bird and butterfly transects, which was great because they had already started before I started working on the project, but we were able to continue with the inclusion of them within our wildlife recording project. We could get them supported, get the volunteers supported with training and help with sort of administration and coordination. And then of course we also had the spider project element of this wildlife recording, which was largely, it wasn't only focused on the Charnwood spider, that was a quite a big element of it, was to re-find the Charnwood spider, which was successfully re-found at Barden Hill, and also Warren Hills and Bradgate Park, I think, since then, since that report was completed in 2023, I think it was. But also because Charnwood Forest is actually has been quite well known for its spider diversity, and I believe a lot of the a couple of decades, the 1980s or 1990s, last century, were quite had a lot of spider recording taking place within Charnwood Forest, and that dropped off a little bit. So that element, we had a consultant come in and carry out that element of the project for us. But I know our local spider specialist, Alan Cann, has also been doing some of that work and refinding the Charnwood spider as well. So yes, that was just to sort of get a more up-to-date picture of our spider diversity within Charnwood Forest. So these are just some pictures from our wildlife recording volunteer groups, and they always seem to have a smile on the face, whether it's nice and sunny, or pouring with rain, which luckily we've not had many of those kinds of sessions. And we've had, I just want to say a massive thank you for everyone who has been involved with the project, because I think we've had around 300 people interacting with the project over the course of the past 4 years. So that's been just really fantastic, and I think largely we've had a lot of fun doing it, and have been to some really fantastic places, and I've met some really wonderful people. So yes, a big thank you to everyone who's been involved, and I hope that sort of it has inspired everyone to keep recording wildlife, and keep getting involved in all the local conservation efforts. And also, I think what's been quite wonderful is, even though this has been a project focused on Charnwood Forest, because of all the training opportunities we've been able to have, I know it's not only people within Charnwood who have benefited from some of the training that we've put on. So I think even just from a general conservation standpoint, that's been a massive plus too. So hopefully I've not run on too late, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for a fabulous overview of that work. It's obviously a massive project at landscape size, and hopefully that you've left that legacy as you move on, left that legacy for people to carry on with the work that you have instilled with them, and draw others in. I'm going to ask you some questions, as people haven't put anything in yet, but please fire in some if you can. Obviously, nature recovery is highly important in Britain and the world at the moment, as we head to 30% wildlife favourable by 2030, both in Britain and in the world. During the work that you have done with landowners, did you sense any change in their views about particularly meadow-rich meadows, or not?
Yes, well, I was really lucky in taking on this project once it was already in the delivery phase. So the people that we had involved were already very keen and proactive. I don't really have to do any convincing on my part. It fortunately wasn't so much of that kind of role for me. What has been really fantastic was that we also had a couple of get-togethers for landowners, which was really important because they all live very close to each other. But when we did get them together, they're all, sort of saying we don't necessarily know what our neighbours or slightly further away neighbours are actually doing, and a lot of them did already sort of know each other. And one of the things that really gets people going, I think, is seeing that someone else is doing it too. The encouragement, I think, from going out to someone else's land holding and seeing, oh, so and so has been doing this, and it's sort of looks successful or whatever, just is a really powerful thing. So that was really great to get people together and just talking about it together. That was a couple of members of staff here from the trust, and about 10 or 12 landowners, mostly, that were involved in the grassland project. So that was fantastic. So I think, not just in my project, but I think overall there is a lot of awareness at the moment amongst landowners of managing their land for wildlife. Of course, it's in the news so much these days, but as ever, we sort of face the funding problem of making sure people are getting the resources that they need to actually carry out the necessary work. And there's often a reason why certain sites get a bit neglected or something, whether that's from not having the correct machinery or just the correct manpower, because a lot of farming and things, of course, people are working with a lot less human resource as well. So yeah, there's a lot to sort of say on that, but I think on the whole, yes, a lot of people are thinking about how they can manage their land better for wildlife and asking the right questions.
That's excellent, and that's what we need. And obviously, a lot of people are working at this at the moment, including, of course, all trusts and people like the RSPB. Coming to more of a specific question, Meadow Sweet, which you mentioned. Certainly, I've worked with the Wildlife Trust for a whole number of years, 20 odd years, and some of their nice meadow sites, or their fabulous meadow sites, such as Cribbs Meadow, Wymond and Rough, has certainly shown extension of Meadow Sweet. And I know it's caused Sarah and Juliet some problems in the last year or two as members of staff as to how to manage it. Why does it appear on the indicator species as a bit of positive when it seems to be a bit invasive?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think I can only imagine, I can't remember exactly, the threshold on there is about 5 or 10, 20 maybe percent of sort of when it stops being a positive. I can only imagine that it's on the positives list because in the right kind of mixed sward, it doesn't really cause problems, and with enough management, I think also it's probably quite a good plant for invertebrates as well. So it's not all bad, but I suppose you could say that really about any of the negative indicators on there. You know, thistles and nettles have their merits too, but I should think it's probably on there. It's a bit like rushes as well that can become very dominant. That they don't cause issues as long as there is sort of active management happening. But obviously, once you get into the realm where things have tipped a bit and it's dominating, and then you know, from neglect or something, and then you do get into a bit of a danger zone of it's quite difficult to push it, knock it back in and lower the percentage again. I think you have to persist for quite a few years before that can happen.
Okay, thank you. No questions are coming, so I'm going to finally ask you about the situation with wildfires in Charnwood. I think there has been one or two in the last week or two. Do you know an update on this?
What was that on? Sorry.
I'm talking about wildfires in the Charnwood area.
Oh, the wildfires. Sorry, yes.
Bardon Hill. Do you have an update, is what I'm saying, as to what the situation is?
You know what? No, I don't. I haven't actually been over to Bardon since that happened, so I don't know which area that occurred in. Perhaps someone here already knows which area that was in, but no, it's certainly very worrying hearing about all the wildfires that have been occurring up and down the country in the past few weeks, isn't it? I mean, presumably a lot of them are, I know it's not really being reported that way, but presumably a lot of them are sort of caused by human activities, but of course are spreading a lot because we have had such a dry spring, and that's certainly something to be a little bit concerned about at the moment, because we're just not really seeing much grass growth at the moment. Obviously we've had a lot of sunshine and a lot of the trees are flowering and things, and it's a fantastic start to the year. And I mean, our butterfly surveyors have already seen green hair streaks up at the top of Timberwood Hill, which is amazing for this time of year, you know, early. But so it's great for that at the moment, but you know, we don't want too much of a prolonged dry spring, the wildfire risks, and also just the risks that things won't grow later on in the season. So no, I mean, I know we've had sort of historically had plenty of fires at Charnwood Lodge. I think there was one at Warren Hills a couple of years ago, wasn't there? And we do often get a bit worried about fires happening at Charnwood Lodge, being quite close to the edge of towns and things. So yeah, it's a concern, and I'm sure the reserves officers are probably on pretty high alert for any kinds of dangers there.
Okay, thank you. Well, Juliet, I don't know if it's our own Juliet, has come in with a question. Is there scope to continue Grosson surveying so that you would have the long-term data and could possibly draw clearer conclusions?
I would love to say yes, and I'm certainly going to be pushing to continue with monitoring, but unfortunately at the moment we don't have the continuation of funding because the Landscape Partnership Scheme is coming to an end this year. Some of the sort of activities from the sort of core geopark team, I think, are carrying on. I know they did get a bit of an extension of funding, but that's not involved our project. So I would really hope that in the future we a couple of years down the line of something, when it's time to go back and do some more monitoring of those sites, that we'll be able to, but at the moment I can't say for definite. But I mean, we recently had a really, what felt like a sort of good success in managing to get one landowner a new water trough by getting sort of extra funding from the geopark, in order to be able to put cattle to graze on his fairly recently reverted hay meadow. It was just sheep grazing pasture before, and we said the evidence points to having some really nice remnant meadow species in here, and it would be great to get the cattle on there to sort of create the conditions to be able to restore the meadow faster with some aftermath grazing. And yeah, and that we only managed to get in early this year. So yeah, I would love to go back and do some monitoring once the effects have had time to sort of accumulate there, but at the moment, not sure.
Okay, I think that is the end of the questions. Now, I don't know if Joe's still well enough and is joining us. Are you there, Joe? Don't think she is. So, oh, you are. Would you like to say anything before we close?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing talk, Isabel. I've learned quite a few things about your project. Obviously, we're sort of passing ships, aren't we, in the office, because you're out and I'm in. But yeah, I've learned quite a bit from what you do, and it's obviously I knew what you did, but not to that extent. All the history and timeline that you went through at the start is really interesting. And we are going to be saying goodbye to Isabel, sadly, when she finishes the project. So we're all going to miss her, and maybe in the future she'll be able to help us with some other projects. So I want to say thank you to Isabel for all her hard work, from the trust, and I think everyone else would want to thank her as well, that's watching this, because she has been an inspiring and a really good part of the team at the trust as well. So always got a smile and always positive. So yeah, we'll miss you, Isabel, and thank you for everything, and hopefully you can have a future when you part. So yeah, that'd be nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to, on behalf of everyone, to agree with everything you've just said, Joe, and to wish you well in the future, whatever you're doing. Maybe you know, but maybe not. I won't explore over this. So can I thank everyone for attending? Thank Joe and the Wildlife Trust for supporting. If you wish to give a donation, you know how. And thank you very much, Isabel, for a fabulous talk. So say good night and best of luck. Okay, so I'll applaud on behalf of everyone. Okay, bye then. All the best. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming.
Bye.
Thank you.